Well, so far we've been talking about investments as pretty much isolated items and looking at them as a kind of individually. Now, that really doesn't happen in real life. You're looking at investments that are in a portfolio, so you have multiple investments all at once, and you really want to know how those react or how they work together, which is pretty different than you might think. Also, set some ground rules here too as well. When I talk about investments, it could mean a lot of different things. It could mean for you and me as individuals, what does an investment mean? It means a stock typically. We're buying a stock or bonds, or maybe even mutual funds to some extent, but those are a little bit trickier because mutual funds are actually portfolios. They're made of hundreds, if not thousands, of individual stocks. But when we talk about organizations like large healthcare organizations, these investments are usually new, maybe product lines or projects like building an outpatient facility or buying that MRI scanner. I tend to pick on the medical imaging stuff a lot because that's what I'm familiar with. But that's what it tends to be. But no, they can be anything that you're kind of buying that's supposed to be returning you some sort of return in exchange for that, and that it has some sort of risk associated with that. So, all right, so we got the ground rules set when I say the word investments. Sometimes I'll flip back and forth between even talking maybe individual like securities or projects. But as I said earlier, when you start mixing these projects together into a portfolio. Whenever you have more than one and you got two, all of a sudden you've got a portfolio. At that point, they kind of react somewhat magically. Let me show you how that works. All right, so let's go ahead, remove my picture off of here. Again, we've already talked about this. They do work. We've been talking about isolation. We're not going to talk about isolation right now. We're going to talk about a portfolio. And of course, when you're now looking at a whole portfolio, you want to see the behavior and the risk inherent with a portfolio. All right, best way to illustrate that is, of course, with an example. So let's go to our example. A lot of numbers here, but bear with me here. I think once you see how this works, you're going to be okay with it. I'm going to try something a little new too. We're going to start using a pen with our lectures in here directly on the PowerPoint. So it might be a little bit of technical learning here as I use the pen. But right now you can see through here we have with this chart, we have our states of the economy. I think we're kind of used to that. That could be anything, of course, but in this case we're using kind of the state of the economy, whether it's anything from very good to very poor. The probability of the economy turning that direction. In this case, we're assuming it's going to be a 10% chance the economy is going to be very poor and a 40% chance the economy is going to be average. These are individual projects or investments, okay, A, B, C, and D, and they're calculated returns based on various states of the economy, okay? Down here, we've got our ER, our expected return. Now, this is for investment A is 10%. Remember, you know how to do that now. You know that it's the weighted average. Doesn't take too much to do that. Not like standard deviation where there's a lot more steps. Not difficult, but more steps. But the expected return on investment A is 10%, and B 10%, C 15, and so on. Now, what we have over here are our portfolios. Now we have a AB, AC, and AD. What we want to do with this particular example, we're going to assume that a portfolio, AB, has 50% of A in it and 50% of B. And we're able also to calculate these returns based on these economic, various situations that we have pretty easily. And let me show you how that works as well. And then we'll talk a little bit more about how to calculate the expected return for the entire portfolio. But I think understanding some of these individual numbers within this overall chart might help as well. Okay, so let's take, for example, we'll pick on AC, okay? So we're going to try our new handy dandy pen here, AC. Let's see here, we'll turn the pen on. There we go, AC. We're going to pick on AC. How was that calculated in this particular instance? Well, you own a little bit. Remember, you own 50% of A in the portfolio. So 50% is written as 0.50. And the return on that is 10% or a negative 10%. Okay. And you're going to multiply those together. And then you're going to add that with the other half of your portfolio, the other 50%. Sorry about that, all the wiggling there with the lines. And the other half of that is C, and that is going to be a negative 25%. Negative 25. Okay. So let's pull out our handy dandy calculator. And I think that we can see this pretty easily is a negative 5 plus, and what you have to do if you can't do it in your head is 0.5 times the negative 25, and remember that's 50%. That's what that 0.5 is. And that equals 12.5% negative, right? So a negative plus a negative is still going to be a negative. So we are at a negative 17.5. And does that match? Yay! It matches. Great. So now you see how that's calculated all throughout the that entire chart. Now, let's look at what we have down here, which is the expected return of the portfolio and how each one of those are calculated. You know how to get these guys. These are the expected returns of the individual investments or projects. But what we want to know is, how do you get these? How are these calculated, an expected return for a portfolio? Well, the good news is it's very easy. Let's move on to our next slide. It's simply the weighted average of the components within the portfolio. Pretty easy math here. Again, just the weighted average of the, I should say, the expected returns of the components, the individual pieces' expected returns. Now, AB is kind of an easy example because that portfolio that has a little bit of A and a little bit of B in there, because it has 10 and 10 on there, comes out to 10. Let's look at one that's a little bit more difficult. We're going to look at that portfolio AC. Let's go back and get our numbers for that. So for AC, our numbers are, as I grab a pen, make sure we can write this down. Okay, so we know that the expected return on investment or project A is 10, and the expected return on project C is 15. Do you see where I'm getting those from? I'm getting them from right down here. Okay, turn my pen back on. Right down here. Okay, AC. I'm getting the expected returns of the individual components. And we're just going to do another weighted average, which I think you guys have gotten down by now. So, again, oops. Turn the pen back on. There we are. We got that 0.5 times 10, terrible writing, plus another 0.5, of course, 50%, times 15. All right, well, we know that is 5, right? And what is half of 15? 7.5%. These are percents here. Sorry, guys. So you keep that. Boy, does that look like I look like I'm writing in Chinese. Okay. Add those up together and you get your 12.5%. Boom, right there. So we know how to get that. So congratulations. Now you've just learned how to calculate the expected rate of return on a portfolio. Very easy. Again, using some of those weighted average skills that you've already learned. Now let's go back for a moment and take a look. I want to show you something about how these portfolios behave when you have two investments in there. And this is sort of that magic that I talked about earlier. So take, for example, let's look at portfolio, well, let's pick portfolio AB, okay? That's made of 50% of A and 50% of B. And where it's special is where you look at when you mix these two type of investments together on how they then change the overall um, variability of the portfolio under certain circumstances. Now, we've got this situation with the investment A, the project that you want to do, and it does very poorly. When the economy is poor, you lose 10%. When the economy is super great, you gain 30. But with investment B, it's a little bit different. It's um, kind of operates sort of what we say contrarian to what the economy is doing. Now, when you have a very poor economy, this is saying that it's going to earn 30%. Wow, what kind of project would earn 30% when the economy's tanking? Doesn't seem to make sense. Well, there are some type of projects out there that could do this. They kind of have this contrarian nature to them where they kind of work in opposite to the general economy. Let's say, for example, maybe you have a certain product or a service line that receives a lot of government funding, and maybe a certain type of government funding. Now, when the economy is in the toilet, what does the government do? Well, they usually stimulate funding. They usually go out and build roads, bridges, start things to try to get the economy up and going again. So let's say, for example, maybe this project might be somehow reliant on heavy government funding, certain types of funding that have proven to be used for financial stimulus during economic downturns. Then when the economy is going great, you don't get as much as Uncle Sam's money as you normally got when times are bad. And maybe this, I mean, just for example, this might be some sort of community health type thing. Hard to say exactly what it might be, but it's special in that the way that it operates and that when things are down, it's up. But when you mix it with your investment A, this is where you have some unusual type of behavior within your portfolio. Look at this portfolio of A and B. When the economy is tanking, what do you have? 10%. Pretty good, right? And then when the economy's average, 10%. And when the economy's very good, what do you have? 10%. 10% straight across the board. I mean, that's pretty special, you know? I would buy that portfolio all day. So you've taken the variability that you would have with a single investment, either A or B, and by having a portfolio, and this is something they actually called modern portfolio theory, is that you're able to kind of counterbalance the negatives with the positives. Now, you may not always want a portfolio that produces consistent 10%. I don't know why, but there could be some situations where you don't want this. Take a look at AC. Now, AC is a little bit more dramatic, but even at that, the downside of AC has been, which is made up of A and investment C, the negative for that very poor condition has been mitigated. So you can only imagine that the standard deviation of that would probably, when you look at this portfolio, when you mix the two together, would probably be tighter than that of the individual investment, especially let's say investment C, which has some pretty wide spread to it, very loose, negative 25 to positive 55. So again, I would anticipate the standard deviation of this portfolio, which we'll go over in a later lecture, and we'll be talking about the deviations of the portfolio, and we'll learn how to calculate those. So, and yet, well, we have it already pre-calculated for us. So we do know that the overall deviation right now is 16.4. So it is tighter than the 21.9. But intuitively, I think you can see that as well. So that's kind of the magic where you can have a portfolio that maybe doesn't have any downside to it, at least theoretically. Or you can have a portfolio where maybe the highs aren't quite as high and the lows aren't quite as low, but you still have a nice return in there. So that's kind of the magic of by mixing two different investments or more, and usually it's projects. We're going to be talking dozens to hundreds of projects that'll be involved in a major portfolio. Or if you're looking at individual securities, like for you or I, when you buy a mutual fund, that mutual fund may have 300 individual stocks in there. So we're talking a lot of these ABCs that are going to be in there. All right, well, that concludes our lecture, I guess, the ABCs on portfolio diversification and how they kind of work together.